Listen to Django Reinhardt. It is the same melody, but what a difference in interpretation.
History often repeats itself. Back in 1959, a man playing a guitar was topping the charts, and the guitar company launched a guitar that they thought was the next best thing, but it started losing its color whenever they placed it in the shop window. In 2004, a man playing a guitar was on the top of the charts, and a guitar company launched a guitar that they thought was the next best thing, but that also started losing its color when it was placed at the shop window or in anyone's house. Hi everyone, welcome to the Ministry of Guitar. Today we have the story of a guitar that some of you may have heard of. It's called the Modern Eagle, and I have it right over here. But while this may look to you just like a regular PRS shape, this is anything such. The story of this guitar will make you go through a little bit of history, a little bit of guitar making tradition, dubious, potentially illegal parts of the story, and at the end of it all, you will find out why this particular guitar may just be the best guitar of the 21st century so far. So our story really begins back in the 18th and 19th centuries. This is not yet the era of guitar, this is more the era of violin. But some acoustic guitars, such as a little company called CF Martin, are starting to make their presence felt. And over the years of making musical instruments, these companies have realized what the best woods are for making these instruments. And no matter what they do, they always come back to the same thing. They tend to use spruce for tops, for acoustic guitars, and then particularly for bodies of acoustic guitars, they use this particular wood from the New World. It's called rosewood, Brazilian rosewood. And slowly but surely, this wood becomes the holy grail. I'm going to let somebody who knows much more about acoustic guitars than me explain why it is the case, at least for acoustic guitars.
There is no doubt about it that when you take the top tonewoods for a guitar back and sides, such as African blackwood, Honduras rosewood, and then finally Brazilian rosewood, there's no doubt that Brazilian rosewood is the king of them all. And it's just, the tone is so subtle, but it has a fineness about it and a tonality that is totally unique in my opinion. So it has that clarity and definition, but yet it's not harsh at all. So for me, if I was building a guitar for myself, it would be Brazilian rosewood.
So while Brazilian rosewood was amazing as an instrument, there was a dark side to Brazilian rosewood. You see, they were essentially harvesting the Brazilian rainforests indiscriminately, cutting down all the rosewood trees. And though musical instruments were only a very small part of this equation, it was mostly furniture, high-end furniture. The reality was that this Brazilian rosewood tree became a part of the endangered species. A consequence of this was that this Brazilian rosewood was then placed on an endangered or a restricted materials list. And because of that, today, something like ivory, literally the tusk of an elephant, and Brazilian rosewood is under the same classification. Now, how do you still have guitars using Brazilian rosewood, you may ask? And it's all about when it was cut. You cannot have new Brazilian rosewood getting cut. A majority of the Brazilian rosewood essentially has been cut before the 1970s. And if you have the provenance to prove this, you are able to use that wood. Now, in the early 2000s is when we get into the story of how this comes to PRS. So essentially, PRS did start using Brazilian rosewood on their fretboards in the 1980s when they launched their first Custom 24. But in the mid-2000s, they decided to embark on the journey of making the ultimate guitar, the traditional Les Paul amplified. And Brazilian rosewood was a big part of that story.
They call Brazilian rosewood the Holy Grail because it has an absolutely beautiful, double note ring to it that lasts a long time. It is remarkable. This instrument here has a Brazilian rosewood neck. You know, if you take a piece of cocobolo and a piece of Brazilian rosewood next to each other, one goes ding and the other one goes duh. Now, which one's going to make a better instrument? You know, it's kind of obvious, right? I mean, this is a big, solid piece of wood. It shouldn't be ringing like this. They used to make concert murmurs out of this stuff. It's just a remarkable wood. It sounds wonderful. We've come out with a new guitar called a Modern Eagle, this is a prototype of a Modern Eagle, that the Brazilian rosewood comes stock on it.
So that's an interesting story. Does it really work? So is there really a difference in the sound of a Brazilian rosewood neck versus a maple or a mahogany? Let's check it out, shall we? Definitely a musical note there. 100%. Let's look at this beautiful Telecaster with a beautiful flame maple neck. Yeah, it sounds a bit dead. I'm going to try some mahogany. This is a beautiful 1981 Les Paul. Don't ask me why it has a Floyd Rose. That's a different story. Let's hear the sound. Again, this just sounds like knocking a piece of wood. There is a definite high ringtone. Not ringtone, just a tone. Ringing. Okay, folks, I think we've established that Paul Reed Smith is not exactly smoking dope. There is something there. But the Brazilian rosewood is only one part of the Modern Eagle 1 story. Let's talk a little bit about the specs, and we'll tell you also about why over the 15 to 20 years since this guitar has been launched, it has developed quite a mythical reputation. So, along with the crazy Brazilian rosewood neck that you see over here, and this is a particularly good example in for this guitar, it had two other innovations. This bridge, where the entire thing is made out of unanodized brass. This leads to great sustain. The second thing about it, which also endears it to a lot of people, is this finish. So when you look at this guitar, you don't know what to make of it because it just looks like you've taken an Instagram picture of a guitar and you've put it in real life. Because imagine you've created a lot of contrast, a lot of highlights. That's what you do in Instagram to make your guitars look good. But this guitar doesn't need a filter. It is just beyond beautiful by itself. Why is that? It has this very unique satin nitro finish, and it's not just about being satin, because many things are satin. It's about the technique where they sand it a little bit and paint it and sand it and paint it. There's a whole thing there. I'm not an expert.
It was the beginnings of fooling around with staining tops like washed denim. You know, we would stain it blue and sand it and have fun with it, and you can see the yellow of the wood coming through and the yellow of the nitro coming through. But the whole idea was to have a big, strong sounding guitar.
Yeah. Is this the first sandouts that we did?
The beginnings of
Beginning of it, yeah.
Look, we weren't even telling anybody what we were doing.
But what I can tell you with my expert eye of owning so many guitars with outstanding maple tops, as you can see behind me, the Modern Eagle 1's finish looks like nothing else. You have to see one in real life and then you have to rub your eyes and then you have to go like, okay, this is the real thing I'm looking at. It is just an incredible guitar. So for me, conceptually, this is also very similar to, say, taking a burst, adding a lot of power to a burst, but not losing any of the clarity. That's what this guitar's remit is, and not losing any of the sustain. So I'm going to run you through a few of the sounds, and you're going to get a good sense of how this thing sounds. Running through the clean sounds, I think you will be able to tell that this guitar does have a lot of body, it has a lot of clarity. One thing of note is, and this is a good point for me to get into the humbuckers, these are called RPs. They're named after the PRS employee who developed them. They're not critically acclaimed. In fact, guitar is critically acclaimed. These pickups, not so much so. Many people prefer the later ones that came with 5708s. For me, I like them actually. And the only criticism that I do have of them is when you split them up, the volume goes down dramatically. That is good in some applications, not good in certain applications. I like it in the context of putting it in the middle position and then you split, so you have both the coils split up, and then you get this almost acousticy sound, great for flat picking, almost good for strumming. Electronics wise, as I was saying, 2 RP pickups, humbuckers, 2 humbuckers, 3-way switch, coil splits, and yeah, single volume, single tone. It's very, very simple. For me, low gain Marshall sounds, low to mid gain Marshall sounds is where this guitar shines, because this is where you get the bite with a lot more body. It's like almost a thin person in a suit with a lot of muscles inside. It's got that kind of it's got a little bit of a push inside of it. And I think that serves itself well when you play leads, because you get a lot of thickness, yet you get a little bit of that searingness, which I'm not very fond of, but that helps with cut through. And it gives you that bark that you sometimes require. If you think about the tone in Lenny Kravitz's Are You Gonna Go My Way, right? You have a lot of bark in that intro. It has that particular sound in spades. So this is a bit like a slightly bright yet full Les Paul, and that's where it excels. Is it the best guitar of the last 21 years or of the 21st century, 23 years, whatever it might be? I think the word best can hold many meanings to many different people. But if I was to look at it from in a little bit more of a 360 point of view, right? How does the guitar sound? How rare is the guitar? How does the guitar feel? How does the guitar make you feel? This guitar, for me, is up there. Not that rarity should affect what you think about a guitar, but let's face it, part of the reason why bursts are so sought after is because they're so rare. This Modern Eagle 1 is up there in terms of rarity, because all the Modern Eagles that came after it, in my humble opinion, were worse, way worse, because the Modern Eagle 2 was this, but instead of a Brazilian neck, it had an Indian rosewood neck. I should like Indian rosewood, East Indian, that's where I'm from, but Brazilian rosewood is better, I will admit that. And it did not have the satin finish, so that defeats the purpose of the Modern Eagle for me. The Modern Eagle 3 was completely different. It had 3 narrow field humbuckers. Now narrow fields have become famous because of the Miles Kennedy, but it's a whole different guitar. The Modern Eagle 4 or the Modern Eagle Quattro does have good humbuckers. It has something called 5310s in it, but again, regular nitro finish, non-Brazilian rosewood neck. It's a different guitar altogether. And Modern Eagle 5, they completely went off what it meant to be a Modern Eagle, because typically a Modern Eagle meant a McCarthy kind of thicker body with a double cut with a rosewood neck. Modern Eagle 5 ended up starting off as private stock with 3 smaller Paul's guitar TCI humbuckers, whole different guitar. So this was the peak. And even today, because I picked up this guitar, I would say this is the time capsule guitar. I picked it up from a gentleman who was the first owner. He bought it in 2007 and he did not play this guitar at all. Maybe a few minutes here and there. So this is basically an unplayed. So this is like literally me going into the showroom 15, 16, 18 years ago and getting the guitar. And I had the opportunity to compare this versus other new guitars. It is at least as good, if not better, an instrument versus PRS's later guitars. Currently, I may be in the honeymoon phase. I am preferring this to my 594. The 594 is great, and it's a well-worn-in guitar. This guitar, even though it's brand new, though it's of course older wood, 20 years or whatever, it just has that magical quality about it. I can see why anyone who's played a Modern Eagle 1 has come back raving about it, and there's many YouTubers, many people on forums. Rarely does anyone have a bad thing to say about it. Maybe it's just the way it looks that seduces people. Maybe it is just the way it sounds. Maybe it's that ring of the Brazilian rosewood neck, how it feels. The whole package of this guitar is greater than the sum of its parts, which is saying something, because the sum of the parts by itself are monumentally epic. The entire neck made from that rare wood. Okay, so history is fun, but what is more fun is playing guitar. So I had this. I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a history lesson. I hope you get a chance to play one of these in real life. If you do, if you get a chance to own one of these, even better. Don't hesitate. And yeah, hope this was fun. Till next time.